Hello, everyone, and welcome to Hit and Hustle from IrishSportsDaily.com. I'm your host, Greg Flammang, and with me, as always, is Jamie Uyeyama, Mr. Jamie University. It is Thursday, June 19th, and we're going to talk recruiting, Jamie. The vibes, as they say, are currently immaculate. Notre Dame had to hit a home run last weekend. It was one of the biggest official visit recruiting weekends I think they've ever had. They had 21 recruits on campus, and they might back close to 1,000 on that. We're going to talk about that. Obviously, decisions have to be made. Commitments have to be made. They haven't been made yet. Things can always change in recruiting, as we saw with Grayson McKeogh, frankly. So they picked up his commitment this week. We'll talk about him. We will talk about new offer on the offensive line, Charlie Thom. And then we'll talk about, where things stand with a lot of Notre Dame's top targets at defensive back, on the defensive line. Talk Kaydon Finley. We'll talk Brayden Robinson a little bit. So it's a jam-packed show of recruiting. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in today. If you like what you hear, please hit that like button. Please hit subscribe. Please hit the notification bell. Whenever it is, we are going live. Links to the podcast are in the description below. And as always, the show is brought to you by ESQ Clothing, founded by Notre Dame alum Ga Wang. You've seen ESQ on all your favorite Notre Dame players and coaches, and some of their recruits' fathers as well, Jamie, as we saw with Jermichael Finley last week. I messed up the thing again. Unbelievable! I messed up the ad read. I can't do that. I have to put it.
Too excited. You're off the game.
I'm too excited. From a perfect fitting suit or sport coat, shirt or bomber jacket, or the perfect tuxedo for wedding season, check out Ga's amazing work at esqclothing.com. Book an appointment to upgrade your wardrobe today. Mention ISD and get 10% off your entire purchase. That's esqclothing.com. People are fired up in the chat. People are excited, Jamie. It's an exciting time. Like, I think, we said it on Tuesday's show. The chances of Notre Dame landing all of these guys are very slim, just from a percentages point of view. But if you look at each individual recruitment, you could see Notre Dame doing very, very well with each individual player. That appears to have happened. Let's start with Grayson McKeogh, the latest commitment for Notre Dame. This one was funny. I think going into the visit and coming out of the visit, there wasn't a ton of optimism there. I think just by nature of the way the player is, he's not very forthcoming with information, not even with the recruits on campus while he was on the visit. So there wasn't a ton of momentum. The fact that he announced that he is going to be committing, like he made that announcement with a PSU collective, was not a good sign. Notre Dame offers Charlie Thom, and the idea is, look, we took that as, look, they're not going to land McKeogh, right? Wasn't a big surprise. Looked like they were pivoting to Charlie Thom. We were talking about that in the ISD chat. And then Matt tells you got to get a film don't lie ready. And we were like, whoa, like that's unbelievable. They made it happen. Talk about Grayson McKeogh, what he means to the Notre Dame class now. This makes 5 offensive linemen. And then we'll pivot to Charlie Thom and what he could bring. He's going to be on campus this weekend as well. So we'll pivot there, but let's talk about Grayson McKeogh first.
Well, I think, he's someone who is kind of similar in a way to quite a few guys where he was a tight end, converted to tackle. So when that happens, that guy's an athlete, and he's a really good athlete. You see him get out on the pole there. He's like a big time athlete at the position, and you could see he's like a reactive athlete, which you just wouldn't describe too many offensive linemen like that.
Yeah.
And, at 6'7", 6'8", he's a natural tackle. Like he is an offensive tackle. He's not a swing guy. He's not a guy who's going to play the interior. And it wouldn't have been a deal breaker for the roster if they didn't get, the right tackle in this class. But he's a guy who could be your future left tackle. He's got that kind of ability. And when you're adding him to what you already have with, Augustine and Black in the previous class, and then obviously they got a ton of guys already who are playing right now that are got a lot of eligibility left too. Gerby Lambert has 4 years of eligibility left, right? They're in good shape at tackle. I mean, Anthony Knapp has 3 years of eligibility left.
Yeah.
Dragusok can play tackle. Like Wagner still has a couple years of eligibility left, right? So they are in very good shape of the tackle position, just in general. And Strebig obviously is another guy who can play tackle as well. So I think they're just. It was one of these things where he's someone who's not even close to the player he's going to be later on too. So he's got a chance to really, really move up. And I think that's someone when you're looking at it right now, like he's a 4-star prospect right now, but he's a guy who can really rise up quite a bit in the rankings. And not that matters all that much. It matters more about like his ceiling, and he's got a really, really high ceiling.
Yeah. Jacob Paulus is asking about the backflip that I think you posted on your new Twitter. What's your new Twitter account? You have a recruiting account. Let's pump that up here.
Yeah. Thanks for reminding me to plug this because it's just all Notre Dame recruiting targets and commits, and it's just going to be clips from them. So that's all it is. And I just when McKeogh committed, I was like, that's the perfect chance to kind of introduce the Twitter account. And there's clips of there on him, and one of them is him doing a backflip. Yeah. He's heavier now, but he was at 260 pounds doing a freaking backflip. Like, name me your left tackle who can do that. There's just not a lot of kids who can do that kind of thing. That's freaky athleticism, and that's the kind of thing that what you want freaks. You want guys that are, athletic freaks, guys, big dudes who could do, freaky athletic things. And he's one of those guys.
Yeah. He's asking me to put it up.
It's at ND Cruden. So CROOTINCLIPS, ND Cruden clips. I tried to make it ND recruiting clips. There you go. Thanks, Greg. But Twitter, X, they said it was too long of a name, so had to change it to Cruden.
Yeah. I can't put up the video because I can't access Twitter from this computer. It's weird. There's a block on it for some reason. It's like not a trusted site or whatever. I'm not really sure what that is, but I'll effort for future shows and show the backflip from there. It's obviously very impressive, right? Like it's what Kenny Minchie did after his touchdown, in the spring game. So that's your left tackle doing that. It's huge, right? Like anytime you can get an athlete of this caliber, and I think we are kind of at the point, especially on the offensive line with Notre Dame recruiting, where you look at the roster and you say they're going to be fine, right? Like if you don't land him, you're going to be okay. And I think the point that you've made, and this is going to be the case with a lot of guys that they're kind of landing now, is you want them on your roster so you don't have to play against them. And that's the thing. It's one thing to look at Notre Dame from just like in a Notre Dame centric point of view with recruiting, where you want these guys, but if you don't land them, it's not the end of the world. They're still going to have a good football team. They're still going to be fine at these positions. But you want them on your team so that they're not on someone else's team making them better. And you're going to have to deal with them later on. And I think that's a huge deal. And so that's what makes this such a big deal for Notre Dame to land these guys. Let's talk about Charlie Thom, right? Because this was a surprise. He's been blowing up over college football lately. He's an offensive tackle. He was playing like H-back tight end type, which I'm watching his clips. Like all of his clips are basically as a receiver tight end type player. It'd be a nightmare to have to play against him just because he's so big and he's so wide and he can get downfield, right? Like he makes plays on the ball. Quite an athlete. And I was trying to think of when you get an athlete like this and they try to move him to the offensive line, it just seems like it always kind of works out. I don't know how it is for other schools because I don't obviously track other schools, but like Joe Alt, for example, like he was a tight end and they moved him and obviously he worked out really well. That's a very like tail end of the bell curve on that and so how that could work out. But Obviously, a lot of schools are liking him because his offer list is really blown up. He's a Notre Dame fan. He grew up a Notre Dame fan. He's visiting this weekend. I think the vibes are very good around him that he might end up in the class. And I think the fact that, the speculation was, oh, they landed McKeogh when they offered Thom. Well, then maybe this offer isn't committable. It sounds like it is. They're going to take him. They're going to take 6 if he decides to get on board. I know you're pretty high on him. You think he's a good football player. What do you see from Charlie Thom here?
Yeah, obviously he's a guy that it's a projection and you're thinking of what he can be. But what is he's someone who, you see him kind of rumbling and stumbling there as a tight end. So same kind of deal as McKeogh in a lot of ways where he's going to be converted, but he hasn't even played tackle yet, right? Like he just converted. So he hasn't played in a season as a offensive tackle yet. But what does it say when a guy goes from basically like no Power 4 offers to getting like a dozen in like a month after he works out, right? And he went to that, Christian went to that big, New England showcase, right? Where they had all of these from these big, private schools in New England where these guys were working out. And he was a guy who caught the attention of a bunch of schools, and he had a lot of attention from Northeast schools. And then this is what I love the most is that he went out and camped. So he came to Notre Dame and he camped at Notre Dame. And that is always a good sign, especially with offensive linemen, because especially for guys that haven't played, all that much offensive line, you want to know, can this guy take coaching? Can this guy get better as you're coaching him within a practice? Mm-hmm. And obviously that was the case. And that's what they feel about it because they offered him and they think really that highly of him. But also he tested out like incredibly well as an athlete, like 5:06.40, which is like an insanely good time. A lot of like high school defensive linemen run 5:06, and those are like good athletes. 9.3 broad jump is like elite for an offensive tackle. That's explosive. And so I love that about him. Like that's something like Kendra Harrison, who's the, pretty much consensus, or like, if not the top tight end, one of the top tight ends in this class. And he's like a freaky big athlete. He jumped 9.3. So even though this guy is like an offensive tackle big, he has that same kind of explosiveness as Harrison. So that says a lot about kind of like his athletic potential. And, you talked about the thing about them taking guys that you would have to play against. Well, Penn State offered him. He camped at Penn State immediately. Like he became like a high priority guy for them. And this is what I love about what happened at Penn State. They had 3 commits there on campus. 2 commits and another guy who they've offered and, are leading for. But he worked out beside those guys and they were like, yeah, we want this guy. Mm-hmm. So one of them is Kevin Brown, who's a top 50 kid in the class, according to the composite. So if you have a guy working out there next to these other guys that you already think are good enough to play for Penn State, and then you're offering him as well. And Penn State, had him already in for, an official visit. So they want him. And if anything, if he was their fallback for McKeogh, Notre Dame lands him, they'd be stealing him from Penn State too. Yeah. So that's 2 guys. And that's not even talking about like the DBs or anything like that. But all that, and I just want to emphasize exactly what you said again, Greg, because I put that as my last point in, we talked about it on Tuesday, and I put it in my last point in 6 Thoughts this week. This is what matters the most right now, is winning these kind of recruitments, because we'll see what he turns into at Notre Dame. But here's what he's not going to turn into that guy at Penn State. because he didn't choose, but or like if obviously if Thom chooses Notre Dame, but that's the way that if you look at like where all of these things are with these guys, you win in June so you can win in January, like later on down the line. That's what it's about, because when you look back at the last couple years and you say they didn't land this guy, okay, you don't land all the guys. Well, the reason why it hurts the most for Notre Dame is that those are guys they're going to have to face. Like they have Caleb Downs on a official visit, and I know it was probably like a long shot. They were like probably running number 3, but still, you want to get him because that's the guy you're going to have to play. And obviously, he picks Alabama. Then he's at Ohio. They face him in the national championship game. Well, imagine if that guy was on your side instead of their side. Right. That's the way you got to kind of have to look at it. And that's the thing with like Nick Singleton. It would have been great if obviously Notre Dame's loaded in the backfield. They don't really need him, but if he was on Notre Dame instead of Penn State's worse. So I think all of those kind of things matter so much now. And all of these guys are like, look at Joey O'Brien's finalists, Penn State, Notre Dame, Oregon, Clemson, all CFP teams,
all playoff teams. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's like Caleb Downs is a good example where Notre Dame's fine at safety, right? Like they're not hurting for safeties. That's not the problem. It's Notre Dame still fielded a very good defense, but you had to play him, and so that's what it is. Like you just want to stack talent on talent. I mean, that to me is like the secret thing for Alabama and Georgia, where it's like, they take players and like Keon Keeley is an example where it's like they have Keon Keeley on their roster and everyone says, well, he's not playing at Alabama. It's like, well, he's a bust. It's like, yeah, but if he was at Notre Dame, maybe that wouldn't be the case, right? Like maybe there isn't the log jam. Maybe he doesn't get caught up in numbers at Notre Dame the way, but Alabama's got him on their roster. So if he's not going to play, fine, but he's not playing for anybody.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of the key in recruiting right now. And that's where Notre Dame is. All right, let's go through. Well, actually, let's talk about Elijah Golden first, because he's going to come on campus. And he's a big one, right? That he is someone we don't have a ton of intel on. Christian has a feature on him. He's going on his recruiting visit, his official visit this weekend. He just put a feature on him. So check out irisportsdaily.com for that. It's a really good interview for Christian. He talks about how, other schools have been recruiting him as a priority while he's on campus. Notre Dame's been recruiting him as a priority all the time. They are always treating him like a very, very important player for them. He could finish out the D-line class in a way that they really want to, right? They've made he's been treated like a priority because he is for them, right? So let's throw out some tape here, show why that is and why this could really finish things out for Notre Dame on the defensive line.
Yeah, so he is another one of these guys too. Like when we're talking about SEC defensive linemen and SEC body type, that's him, right? Which is those are the guys when we're talking about Bryce Young. That's someone that, Kirby Smart points out as, wow, look at this guy. Well, he's in the same vein. Like he's one of these guys who's just big, long, got explosive traits. I think he is raw in a lot of ways, right? Where he's got a lot of work to do in terms of just his technical development and just his level of consistency in terms of being a dominant player all the time. But the traits are special. The traits are special. And you can see when he gets off the ball like that, he's not going to get blocked by anybody, right? Like it doesn't matter who he's going against, right? And so you get a guy that side, you see him playing here. I think, some people list him as an end, but he's going to play inside. He's going to be a 3-tech in college. And that's a big need. And when you have that too, a guy who can rush the passer, play all 3 downs, do that kind of thing, it's invaluable.
Yeah, I mean, obviously they've made him such a huge priority. He's the last visit. The fact that he got to the last visit, like the fact that he got there and it's going to happen, he's going to visit, and he hasn't really, like, there's some buzz about like Alabama, right? And other schools. It's just, you just kind of feel like they're going to get it done, right? They set up for this. Like they set up to be at this point where they are the last official visit. He's seen a bunch of other schools. And the fact that they've kind of shown they know how to close on these guys, given the way the rest of the board looks, And so I think it's going to happen for them. Obviously, things can change very quickly in recruiting. I'm going to say that over and over again just because it's true. And you can't count your eggs until they're all in the basket and everything. And look, even if all these guys commit to Notre Dame, there's a long way till signing day, right? A lot can change there as well. We got to keep that in mind. But look, we're going to be monitoring that. Christian's going to be all over that. Speaking of being all over things, Ian Premer is leaving his Notre Dame visit today. So check out updates on that. We've heard positive things about what's going on. What that actually means, we don't know. Evan Jacobson has to make a decision. Ian Premer has to make a decision. Preston Fryzel has to make a decision, right? Could Notre Dame take 3 tight ends, right? That's something that has to be adjudicated as well. But let's go over some of the players who visited last weekend, and we've got some intel on. First, Christian's putting a bunch of updates on DB recruiting right now on the Irish Sports Daily message board. I suggest you check those out. A lot more optimism surrounding Nicholas Reddish than there was maybe a couple of days ago. It seems like Notre Dame was able to close very well on him. Decision day isn't is July. It's July. I can't remember which. It's in July. I know that. I know it's not supposed to be in June. So that's coming. So there's some time there, but it looks like Notre Dame is closed well on him. Look, this is a good football player, Jamie. I likened him to. He's kind of like a Nick Coleman, Sean Crawford hybrid where he's not as explosive as Crawford was in high school, but I do think he's a little bit more explosive than Nick Coleman was in high school. And I feel like there's kind of a mix there because they're around the same kind of size. I love how he closes. He's got some clips here where he really comes downhill quickly. This is a very good play coming on the middle of the field and breaking this up, actually making the interception. So look, this is a good addition to the class. And if they are able to land him, Jamie, I know we like Donovan Webb more, but this is still a really good football player.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's not that I don't like Reddish. It's just that just if you prefer one or the other, that's fine. Yeah. I think, and Jacob Paulus mentioned it too. It's his instincts, right? Like you could see it. And I think some people, might say, oh, it's just recognition. I mean, it's generally the same thing, right? Like he's a guy you could tell he's a smart football player. Yeah. Like the way he, knows when to break off of something, he plays with good eye discipline. Like that's something that you see. Right. And that is critical for the safety position. So I think he's one of these guys that he has a very high floor. Like I would be very surprised if he isn't like a solid player at the very least at wherever he ends up. And I think that when we're talking about having guys in your DB room that you can count on, that obviously you want guys with super high upside, you want freaks, and you want all this too. You want guys that that you can count on like at any time. And I think he's going to be someone that plays for Notre Dame, and if he chooses Notre Dame and plays well, right? Like I think he's probably the way I would look at him is, and I think he can be better than him because he's a better athlete. But I think of like Clarence Lewis, because Clarence Lewis is a super smart football player. And there's a reason why the guy played as a true freshman, and then played the most snaps on the team as a sophomore. And then obviously he got beat out. Benjamin Morrison comes along and wins a starting job. But then Lewis can play the nickel because he's smart enough to play the nickel, and he can do this. And he was very much in the same of the mold of Matthias Farley, right, where he can do that same kind of thing. And that's the way I kind of think of Reddish too, as like a Farley kind of Clarence Lewis type of guy, with probably a little bit more upside than that. But yeah, that's how I see it.
So Jacob Paulus asked, could Reddish play nickel? I assume you agree that he could.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. It's very easy to see, especially with what they asked him to do in high school. Like he's got that skill set that he showed. He's played coastal line of scrimmage. He played in the nickel. In the slot a couple of times there in a couple of clips. He played on the hash. He played deep. So the versatility is good. And I think, very similar to, Sean Crawford in this way and Julian Love in this way as well, by the way, is that they moved him all over the place, and that's obviously a good sign, right? It speaks to, his recognition or his instincts or his IQ or whatever you want to call it. It speaks to the fact that they can put him anywhere and he can play really, really well. So that's important for any kind of DB group. Something we do a lot with Jamie is buy or sell with recruiting. And so as we're going through everybody at this point, if we were going to do a buy or sell on kind of everyone we're talking about here, it would be a buy to be honest, right? Like that's kind of where the vibes are. Look, it's been on social media, right? If you've been on Irish Sports Daily, you've seen the updates that we've put out. We're confident that Notre Dame's going to land a lot of these guys, if not all of them, right? It was truly like it could go down as one of the best weekends that Notre Dame's had in recruiting in recent memory, right? That's where it could go. Let's move on to Khary Adams, the corner that, it's people focus on Joy O'Brien. I think his name's been a little bit within Notre Dame circles for longer, and I think that's kind of why there's the 5-star status that he has in some circles. So I think that's also why Khary Adams is just as big of a recruit for Notre Dame, if not bigger, depending on who you talk to, depending on what you think Notre Dame's needs are. Look, it's trending very well for Notre Dame with Khary Adams. What does he bring here? I see a lot of Dallas Golden to him, where it's like there's so much on offense and he's just kind of gliding out there. At times on tape, it looks like it's kind of too easy for him. He might be a little bit bored when he's playing offense. He's got everything you want. I think he's more polished as a defender than Dallas Golden was. Like I think he'll have less work to do technically, because I think he's a little bit more advanced than Dallas Golden. Quality football player, Jamie.
Yeah, that's the way I see it too. I think he's probably a guy that, and I'm sorry, Greg, because I know Dallas Golden's your guy, and I love Dallas Golden too, but I think he's a little bit better than what Golden was, just because of he's more advanced on the defensive side of the ball, like you said. But it's like very similar, just athlete, like football player, guy who's just good. Like you watch him and you're like, it does look easy for him because it's just like he's a different kind of athlete.
Yeah.
And I think too, when we're talking about track speed and we say like track speed, and I think when I think of that, everyone's always thinking of like 100-meter times or whatever. But when I think of like track speed, I think of guys who know how to run properly.
Yeah.
Like, and it's easy speed is what I would call it, right? Like where their stride, it just looks so smooth, right? It just looks so smooth. And that's what I see in Adams. Man, I just think he's got sky high potential. I am just a huge fan of his. And I think that, to me, he's a guy that is like a borderline top 50 kid to me. That's the way that I view him. Might even be a top 50 kid. And I think he's going to be a great player in college.
Super. He's super athlete. I think what you're talking about there is just like he knows how to run. It looks effortless. And those are the kind of players that you like. Like he seems to be able to run as fast as he needs to in a moment.
Yes.
It's like is he ever reaching his top gear, and a lot of these clips, it's like, man, he's pulling away, but I don't know that he's actually reached his top gear here. Like, I just think he ran as fast as he needed to pull away, and off he goes. It seems like if he needs to get the corner, he can get the corner. It seems like however fast he needs to run on a post, he's going to run that fast. He just seems to understand the game, and I think that's very similar to Dallas Golden, where from a technique standpoint, Golden isn't really there, but he always understands kind of where the ball is going and how to get to that point before the ball gets there, or before the offense gets there, and and I agree with you. Like he as a high school player, especially as a high school junior, I think he is better at defensive back than Dallas Golden was. It's like these are two top 50 caliber players, right? Like this is what you're bringing into your program. Yeah, they're just awesome. And then you look at Joey O'Brien, where the vibes are just as strong for him as they are for Khary Adams. There's a lot of buzz out there. This is a special player, right? I think this is, if Kyle Hamilton was rated where he ended up, this is kind of where Joey O'Brien is. I think people see it earlier with Joey O'Brien. He's, of course, the teammate of Grayson McKeogh. I think he's a little bit closer to like Bobby Taylor than he is Kyle Hamilton. Kyle played the game with a little bit more recklessness as a tackler. Like he's just very violent player. I think Joey O'Brien will probably test better than him. Like if, the 4.59, the famous 4.59 40 time, he'll probably test a little bit better than that. I think his acceleration is a little bit better. But they have very similar skill sets because he's got that corner in him. That's why I say Bobby Taylor, because I think he could play corner at the college level. And I don't know. I mean, Kyle could play there, but it's like, that's not going to be his position. I do think Joey O'Brien could. I do see the ability for Joey O'Brien to, like, if they just said, you're going to be an offensive player, I do think he could be full-time offense in a way that Kyle could not. Special football players with the size and the ability to move and all of that, Jamie.
Yeah, and I think one of the things when I think of, like, say, Kyle Hamilton right now with the Ravens is he's someone who has shown, and he showed it at Notre Dame too, but the versatility to be like a nickel player, to be a deep player, right? To rush the passer, to do all of these things. And that's how I kind of see Joey O'Brien in a lot of similar ways, right? Where I could see him being a guy like just a chess piece, right? That they can use on defense and use in different ways, depending on the matchup. That's the kind of talent he has, right? So, in a lot of ways too, I think he's similar to Jadon Blair. Obviously Blair was another guy who played receiver too, and you could see he's got receiver skills, but he's I think just a little bit more fluid than Blair, and has more ball production at the high school level, just on defense. So I think that's probably the difference between those guys. And I wouldn't say, like, I think Kyle Hamilton, like you said, there's just a little bit like, O'Brien's got good instincts, but like Hamilton's instincts doesn't get enough credit for how I think he does now, obviously, but he clearly did not get enough credit when he was a high school prospect by most people, right?
Yeah,
I'm not saying us, but by most people. And I think that's probably where it's just like on a scale of 1 to 5, Hamilton's a 6. Well, O'Brien's probably a 5.
Yeah.
Like he's right there, and that's probably just like the difference.
Yeah, and I mean that was the thing that when we saw him as a high school player, he was in a junior. That was the thing that stood out. There's a lot of good players, but when you see the instincts that he had, just in all facets of the sport, whatever he was doing, and his anticipation and the way that he saw plays unfolding so quickly, that's what separated him. In addition to the size and the speed and all those other things. And look, that's why the ball knowers knew, Jamie, that he was going to be a superstar. Let's make a quick transition here. Virginia wanted to make a transition to the team, get off of recruiting for just 1 second. And if you want to make quick transitions with your media company, Jamie, then you know what you can do. You can go to VSR Media, founded by Notre Dame football pregame host and Emmy award-winning anchor Vahid Sadwazadeh. VSR Media provides professional and cinematic video and photo. Whether you're looking for a collegiate or pro-level highlight reel, have a personal story to tell, or are aiming to diversify and grow your business, VSR Media specializes in short and long-form video storytelling, social media management, and website design. VSR Media also captures professional headshots, senior in sports photos. Contact them at vsrmediacompany.com. Mention Irish Sports Daily to receive 20% off your first project. Visit them online or give them a call at 574-800-9106. This is just straight from the chat. Wasn't on the outline. Okay. From Virginia Herman. Quick question. Do you guys think we may see more carries from Jadarian Price this season or even Aeneas Williams? Are they going to take carries, even more carries, away from Jeremiah Love and give them to Price and or Williams? This is obviously assuming health.
I mean, I don't think they're going to take it. They're not going to take him away from Jeremiah Love. I don't think that's going to happen. But I think what's going to happen is the quarterback run game isn't going to be nearly the same. Right. No matter if Kenny Minchie wins the job or not, it's just not going to be as big of a thing. You're not going to see drives like you saw at the beginning of the national championship game where they just like rode Riley Leonard's legs to an opening drive touchdown. That's not going to happen anymore. So 184 attempts for Riley Leonard. Obviously, that's including with the sacks, right? So if you take the sacks out of it, but he basically, I think he was almost identical to Jeremiah Love in his total carries. Love had 163, which also seems like low for a guy that good. In fairness, he was hurt a little bit too at the end, so that played a part in it. But I mean, I think Love's carries are going to go up. Price, who had 120, that's going to go up. I think what'll be interesting with Aeneas Williams is, let's say they decide like, well, we got to get Love more opportunities. And one of the ways they do that is to say, well, Aeneas Williams is still going to play on third down, but maybe not every time because we want to use Love there too. So how much does that change with what Williams's usage is? Would we see? I think that Williams would be the clear number 3 to me, but they do have Jabron Payne. It's a pretty good player. Keedron Young might get some run too. I don't think Nolan James, just because he's a freshman. Yeah. Like you're just always thinking, well, but to be honest, he looks pretty darn good. Like it's not out of the question that he like beats out a bunch of guys and leapfrogs some dudes and has a role this year. So I think it's going to be really interesting to see how they kind of figure out after Love and Price and where the usage goes there. Because I'm pretty confident they're going to like get more touches for both of those guys. With Love obviously leading the way. Yeah.
There's a question from Matt Lee asking, just got here and great show, guys. Does Notre Dame still take Reddish from North Carolina if they get Adams and O'Brien? They will take him. And I mean, look, I'm not like involved in their planning or anything. I have to think that having all 5 of those guys with Chase and Williams on the visit last weekend was on purpose, to be like, this is the class right here with Aiden Pouncey as well. I mean, why wouldn't you do that, right? If you have the chance. I mean, you could just look at this picture here and you look at there that, I mean, this could be Notre Dame's DB class for 2020, 2026. I look at, they're all hanging out together. I mean, this is, if this is the class, Jamie, it's just it's star-studded.
Pretty good looking class, man.
It's as good as they've had. Yeah. And it's as good a DB class that they would have landed in probably the recruiting ranking era, right? Where it's like when 247 and Rivals and, whatever, whatever that it was back in
Rivals was like 2002 or something.
Yeah.
I think just off the top of my head, I don't think they would have a DB class that would match it. You could go back to the Holtz times and sure, whatever, right? Like, but it's a different time. different time.
Yeah.
And I'm sure someone could point to, well, era, you didn't even know about these things. Like, seriously, because it's crazy. I mean, not just for just like a random tangent, but like when you're reading like books about that era of pun intended of Notre Dame football, and how they just took as many guys as they wanted and just didn't care, and people just went to Notre Dame. They're like, yeah, like I know I probably won't play, but this guy was like a stud. And then he, instead of going to, Purdue or whatever, he just decided to go to Notre Dame and be like, start out as the ninth string cornerback. I'm sure those times they probably had some ridiculous classes back then. But yeah, it's this would be a special class.
Yes. Nick Dean asked, do you guys really think Notre Dame has a shot at Joey O'Brien?
Yes.
I would be surprised if they didn't land him, to be honest. Very surprised. I don't think he's committed to Notre Dame. I don't think he's a silent or anything like that. But I just, the vibes are the vibes, and look at it. It's kind of around, the vibes are even stronger than the vibes that we got that Vallejo was going to Michigan. And we were pretty sure they were going to Michigan, or he was going to Michigan. Especially 2 days out or whatever it is. I think someone asked what time on Friday. It's 7:30 Eastern that he is going to announce his commitment to some school. So yeah, that's kind of where it is. I mean, look, everyone's fired up for a reason, and that reason is that reason is because this is how we feel about it.
I just want to point out too, because as Drew Benson mentioned there, that last year's DB class was also elite. Yes, it was. And that's really kind of what you're talking about, because when you stack classes like that together, listen, not every one of these guys is going to hit. It never works like that. But a number of them are. A number of them are and are going to be great. And those guys who do hit, it's going to be like pretty special. And that's how you play elite defense, is you stack classes like that at DB, right? You stack classes like that at all around, right? That's why if you look at where Notre Dame is right now at linebacker, and you thinking you're like, wow, they're deep at linebacker, and look at all these athletes and all that. It's like, well, they were stacking classes, and that's what put them in this position right now.
Yeah. There was a question about Cam Williams in here. Let me see if I could find it. They were asking about that Jimmy Page asked, what's the latest on Cam Williams' development? We don't know until camp starts. I mean, he's working out with everybody. We won't know until camp gets going and where he's at. And I mean, I think obviously it was a big offseason for him. He got a ton of reps. I mean, look, we heard some good things about him in the spring, right? Not amazing things or anything like that, but we heard some good things about him, that he was making plays and he was getting more comfortable. I think most importantly, like, he's got to be patient, but he's also got to be urgent as well, right? Like, there's a patience and there's an urgency that has to be there for him, where it's like, hey, it doesn't have to happen right away, but there needs to be strides, and you need to be kind of pushing for that kind of thing. Because for him, it's going to get late early if he doesn't make considerable strides, right? But also, if it doesn't happen, like, you know what I mean? Like, it doesn't have to happen right now, but he's got to be pushing for that. Would you agree with that take?
Yeah, I think so, because you have there with other guys, like, they're breathing down your neck, and that's the way it is, right? So if he's going to play the field, well, Elijah Burks came in and had a pretty good spring for an early enrollee. So there's that. I mean, Williams was playing the boundary all spring, and he got a ton of reps. But guess what? Micah Gilbert is back, this summer. So only one guy's going to start there, this year. And I mean, that's going to be Malachi Fields. But if you want to be the next guy who plays this year, you got to beat out Micah Gilbert if you want to be the next guy who plays in the boundary. Or if you want to be the next guy in the field, well, you got to beat up these other guys. That's the way it goes, right? And I think right now, if you look at where Notre Dame is at, where they have Fields, Pauling, Faison, Greathouse, I think that's a pretty, it's a good top four, and it's also I think it's a pretty firm, that's their top four heading into the summer and fall camp. And it'll be about how many guys do they play and who can be the next guys, because you're not going to play 9 receivers. That's just not going to happen, right? Where guys actually play. Maybe some guys will play a little bit more because of injuries or whatnot or whatever, but you're not going to rotate 9 guys in. It's going to be probably 6, 7 tops. That's just the way it is, right? Because only so many guys get touches, only so many guys get reps. And I think it's important for a guy like Williams, a guy like Gilbert to get in there and be a guy that, so if there is an opportunity, hey, you're the next guy. And so if you do want him to kind of take that step, he doesn't have to be a superstar this year, but he has to show that he's taking a step and getting there. And I saw that, CB Hertz mentioned KK Smith. I mean, it is kind of time for KK Smith where he has to show something here because of what I just said about Burris at the field. KK Smith wants to play, wants to be one of those 6. Well, he's got to beat a guy like that out. If he wants to be the next slot, he's got to do that. He should be trying to be I want to beat out Jordan Faison, right? He has to be thinking of that kind of way. And that's how all those guys need to be thinking. And it's similar to kind of a defensive tackle where they got a lot of bodies there and a lot of guys that I think are pretty good players, but they're not playing 8 defensive tackles. Yeah. Maybe they play 5, 6 tops, right? So it's going to be a battle to get in there. And these guys have to kind of make sure that they're taking steps, that they are ready when they get their opportunity.
Yeah. And I think Rajon makes a good point. Williams himself needs to feel like he's getting there. That's important. He needs to feel like it, right?
Yeah.
Because if he doesn't feel like it, then it's not going to, then others aren't going to see it either, right? So he's got to have that. He's got to have that confidence. Let's talk a little, keep it on receivers and talk about the recruiting aspect a little bit. Feel very good about Devin Fitzgerald and where that's headed. I think Notre Dame's going to land him. I like Notre Dame against Stanford. I just do. He canceled North Carolina, which kind of had that, Bill Belichick tie over there. He canceled that visit. It's a Notre Dame-Stanford battle. I just like Notre Dame in that Notre Dame's a real program, and Stanford kind of isn't right now.
You don't even know who your head coach is going to be next year, right? So,
yeah. The one where it was, I told you, man, I don't know what to make of this recruitment. Brayden Robinson, the lack of any kind of momentum or anything kind of led me to believe, are they pushing? Are they pushing? Is this a slow play? We have heard some rumblings that there is positive momentum with Notre Dame and Robinson. Let's see how it goes. He's got the July 20th commitment date sitting there, right? Let's see if there's movement towards that getting pushed up a little bit. I've always been kind of in the camp, just take him, he's fast. What does it hurt, right? I don't think it hurts anything to have someone like him on your roster, someone as fast as him. His size is his size, whatever it might be. I like taking speed. I like taking a lot of speed, right? And figuring it out. And so I don't know that this means anything with Kaydon Finley. I think they remain optimistic about Kaydon Finley. I think they feel comfortable with where they are with Kaydon Finley, as comfortable as you can be with him going to Texas. I don't think it means anything on that front. I just think they should take him. Why not? It's kind of like Charlie Thom, but just at wide receiver. Like Charlie Thom, you have someone who is versatile, who has a skill set that could have some upside. I think there's upside here with Brayden Robinson, with someone that fast. as long as he's not taking a spot, right? Like as long as he's not taking someone like Devin Fitzgerald's spot or something like that, then I just think you take him and see what happens. That's just kind of how I feel about it. I don't know where it would go. I mean, we've kind of talked about it a bunch, right, Jamie? And just like how we feel about Robinson there.
Just one name that I was just thinking about this, and I think this is like a kind of a good name to bring up, even though he didn't end up signing with Notre Dame and he's bounced around. Now he's at Kansas State, but Dylan Edwards was another guy who was just like, I don't know what this dude is, but he's just fast. Like he's just fast. And that's a guy that for Kansas State, I don't know if he, everybody thinks of Darren Sproles or whatever, and you're going to be the next Darren Sproles. Who knows? I don't know what he's definitely going to be, or if he's going to be like ever going to be a starting running back or anything for them. But I just know that if you get a guy and he becomes Tutu Atwell, he becomes like Tyler Scott or something like that from Cincinnati, like one of those guys. It's like, well, then that's someone who's going to help you win games and make your offense more explosive, make your special teams more explosive. And I mean, the guy can fly.
I mean, we saw Dylan Edwards like win a game for Colorado. Against, I think it was against TCU in kind of the first game of the Deion Sanders era, where he scored 4 touchdowns and was just electric, right? Like he won a game for them. I mean, I don't want to say Jaden Harrison like won Notre Dame the game against Georgia, but he went a long way. Like you put him up 2 scores, and I mean it was at that point, or I'm sorry, 3 scores. Put him up 3 scores. At that point, it was like, I don't know how Georgia's going to score enough points to get to 20. And so, again, you bring speed on your roster, and that makes a big difference. I want to just kind of end with, obviously the success that Notre Dame is having and appears set to be having in the coming days. There's tons of reasons for this, right? The recruiting staff, obviously, Marcus Freeman being the head coach, the culture that Notre Dame has. There are so many things. So I was wondering about this. Sorry to interrupt. Hey, Bob, Donovan Webb is no longer visiting, FYI. I'm not surprised because of the news that we were getting about Nick Reddish on this front. I was wondering about this. Like, to me, Donovan Webb was the guy where it's like, if we don't get Reddish, we're gonna try to get Webb. I don't know if this is confirmed, so I'm on live here, so hopefully this is correct. I mean, it's Hey Bob says, I guess they're comfortable with where they stand with the other DBs. I think they are comfortable. I think they are, and I think that's indicative of that situation. But how did they get to this point, right? Like, how did they get to the point where Donovan Webb is someone that you can kind of turn away to, kind of bring it back to my original point? And I think Marcus Freeman's a huge part of this. I think their recruiting operations are a huge part of this. I think, the changes that they're making with the new athletic facility is a huge part of this. Like, it all kind of is there. I think for me, the way the teams that they've been able to beat, Jamie, I think is huge in this. I think being able to beat Georgia, I think being able to beat Penn State, and I think being able to, beat Indiana, but it was like, Indiana, Georgia, Penn State. I think the way that happened, I think that causes players to view Notre Dame in a different kind of way. It puts them into a different category where they are an elite program because they're beating elite programs to kids. And I've kind of gotten a taste of this with, funny enough, my daughter's soccer team. And I'm telling you, club recruiting is very similar to college football recruiting. It just kind of is. And there's a category that certain clubs are in where it's like the top players are just not going to go to that category. And I think Notre Dame, that was kind of Notre Dame's problem for a long time, was they're just not in the category of the Ohio States and the Georgias, and the Alabamas. And I think Marcus Freeman last year, I think he had a category change for them where he put them up there And I think that is kind of why, a major part of why we're seeing Notre Dame close on these top guys, because of A, that category change, and B, what they've been able to do with the types of players that they are now recruiting, And so I just wanted to kind of talk about that at the end here. It's obviously a mix of everything, but I think that category change that Notre Dame is going through is a big reason why they've been able to kind of make strides the way that they have.
I think that is probably not talked about enough, because let's just say that Notre Dame lost to Georgia in that game, which easily could have happened.
Could have.
It's not like would have been a bad thing if they lost to Georgia, in terms of like Georgia's pretty good, but the narrative that has hung around would still be sticking around. And it's very hard to recruit against Georgia if you can't beat them and on the field. And it's hard. Tell me if you think that they'd be doing as well against Penn State right now with all these guys. First of all, this is the most times that I can remember them going like head to head with like Penn State for specific recruits.
Pennsylvania kids.
Yeah. And I mean, obviously it's not just head to head. There's other schools involved, sure. But Penn State, these are like top priority guys that they want there. And I've seen some like Penn State people saying like it's about NIL and all this. Like, nah, man. No, I mean, it's not that. It's like, don't get me wrong. Notre Dame is doing everything they right in the right way in terms of that, but that's not what it's doing it. That's not why, especially some of these guys, that's not why the offensive linemen there are choosing Notre Dame, because like, well, Notre Dame's NIL package is just like, this much greater or whatever. No, it's not that. It's all the other things that are going on with the program that come from winning those games. And it's just, James Franklin is, even though, small game James, hasn't won these games. That's why it's hard for like Penn State to beat Ohio State when it comes to like, hey, this is like a head-to-head battle, or why it's hard for them to beat Notre Dame now, or Michigan. Penn State Penn State recruits well, and they get some great players. It's not just that, right? But I think that if you look at kind of like where they're at right now, it's hard to kind of get over that hump if you aren't winning those games. And that's where they are. And you can only sell hope for so long when a guy's been there for over a decade. And Marcus Freeman, he's going into year 4, and he's already launched himself with what they did last year into, well, he's in the top 5 coaches lists. He's on all this. All of a sudden, like Mike Mickens is being talked about as like, this guy's one of the best defensive back coaches in the country. And all of their coaches are praised and seen in a certain light. That doesn't happen if you're not winning, right? So I think that is a great point by you, and something that really isn't talked about enough. It's underreported how important that is.
And how do you negative recruit against Notre Dame now?
Well, you can negative recruit in other ways, but not about what they're doing on the field.
Right. And you can, but it doesn't hit the same.
You can about like, hey, do you want to live in Indiana or this and that kind of thing, or do you want to live in South Bend, or do you want to live in here? Like, do you I mean, maybe you don't want to go into school. Yeah. There's all that kind of stuff that people will still use. And guess what? Those guys don't even choose Notre Dame. That's why some guys, it's like Notre Dame's not even a consideration. So right. I get it, or whatever. But most of the guys that Notre Dame is in with at this point, they obviously are considering that already, or else Notre Dame wouldn't be this far down the line with them. So it's that makes the big changes, right? They'll deal with that kind of stuff, and that's there. But when it comes down to it, it's going to come down to development. Hey, are you developing the kids? Are you putting guys in the league? are you winning? And they're doing it. And I really think too, because that's the next step too, is putting more guys in the league. And, they had like a decent last year in terms of, last couple years really in terms of draft picks. But you haven't seen like a lot of like the super high picks, a lot of like, day 1, day 2 picks.
Yeah.
Not enough of them compared to some of these other programs. But that is going to change, I think, in the next couple of years. You're going to just see more of that, and with that it makes it a lot easier to recruit things, right? So you certainly can win recruiting battles with just a lot of hype and a lot of like promise and hope, and that's what's going on at USC right now, right? Yeah. There's a lot of that, but that's why too, if USC comes out and stinks up the joint this year, they're going to have problems keeping those guys, because they're going to be like, well, you didn't really show me what I wanted to do. And I don't care if those guys are from California or not. Some of those guys are going to leave if they don't produce on the field this year.
Yeah. It's just, and it just shows like how important winning those big games was, those big bowl games, those big playoff games, how important it was when you get over that hump and all of a sudden the recruiting is going really, really well. So it was important. And Marcus Freeman, it's just like Jimmy Page says, Marcus Freeman is a rock star. He's building something special. He definitely does appear to have an it factor in college football right now. And, it obviously it's huge. So we're going to be monitoring everything that's going on in the next few days here with recruiting visits, with Elijah Golden, with, look forward to some announcements. I mean, obviously Joey O'Brien is tomorrow. You never know what could pop up other than him. So stay locked in to IrishSportsDaily.com. Check us out. We'll be back on Monday with Power Hour. We'll be back on Tuesday with Hit and Hustle. Hopefully talking about some commitments from Notre Dame prospects at that point. So have a good rest of your weekend, everyone. We'll talk to you soon. Keep hitting and hustling.